Hello there, my name is Dr. Salim Javed and we are talking about 50th curve, how status quo gets into climatic situation through fluctuation and how there is a falling action part. This is what we have been talking about. Now, there is a connection between John Gottlieb Fifth advocacy for mathematic philosophy, partially in relation to geometry, and John Gardner's being labeled as philosophical novelist. Now, this is something very interesting. When you go and watch Kalki, for that matter, film, Prabhas starring, then you realize that it is a futuristic film which is based in future, but it has got philosophical grounding. Now, this is something when you watch Lord of the Rings also, when you watch this film that I am talking about, when you watch Ramayana also, when you watch Mahabharata also, or when you watch for that matter Avengers also, Infinity War and everything. These films are working because there is a philosophical understanding which is working behind them. Somebody can argue what is philosophical ground for Avengers Endgame or many other films, Salim sir, that you're talking about, like The Lord of the Rings and all these things. But or for that matter, a lot of other interesting programs which are becoming hits across the world without philosophical understanding. No, uh, because when you talk about a philosophical term, so suppose you are talking about very minor things. I'm not talking about utopia. I'm not talking about um, the cave effect. I'm not talking about a lot of other concepts. Like suppose say that greed is greed, a very normal term called greed, and uh, how stories are woven having greed as center or as seed, an entire series is made out of it. You need to have that sort of a philosophical understanding, which has got a root in human psyche or metaphysics for that matter. Like suppose setting aside the puzzling name choice, Gardner developed the 50th curve model by analyzing persistent and influential stories. Now, like suppose when you read Ramayana, when you read Mahabharata, when you read Panchtantra, when you read Bakilal, or when you read Nagraj or Super Commando Dhruv, or for that matter, Spider-Man, He-Man, or Superman, or Batman, you know, there is these are influential tales from present and past. You know, somebody is believing in these tales, you know and somebody has been drawing inspiration. Like for somebody, Batman is a very inspiring story. For us the Indians, Ramayana is an inspiring way that how Lord Ram has lived his life. Mahabharata is a wonderful saga of how relations work on a multiple level. Different sort of narrators are there. Around 6 to 7 types of narrators are there. Somebody coming directly, somebody. There are 6-7 ways in Mahabharata the narrators forms. So Panchtantra, beautiful fables, wonderful way of understanding how life, society, this country or this world or this cosmos works. So when you understand story structure, you become a finer individual. That is what this is what I talk to a lot of my colleagues, that when you have an interest only in a very specific area, chances are that it dehumanizes you. When you keep on reading across disciplines, you develop the understanding, different core of your personality, and it helps you, evolve as a better human being. The approach has since functioned as a flexible guide for constructing a diverse range of narrative spanning from novels to interactive media that I was talking about. Now, the potent plotting technique has three essential parts in 50 curve that synergistically contribute to developing a captivating storyline. You have a rising action, you have a climax, and then you have a resolution. To understand these three elements of 50 curve, now I'm going to talk about a very interesting film. If you have not seen this film, I would suggest that you see this film. It is called The Martian. It was released in 2014, and it is directed by Andy Weir, and the protagonist was Matt Damon in that. Now, this Martian film was released in 2014. When you watch that, like, before I tell you more about this, let me give you the story in brief. The film starts on Mars. There are few astronauts there. A storm comes. The main protagonist is stuck on that planet. Other people reach Earth. Now he is alone on that entire planet. There is a cell that he has, and people have left to Earth. He is alone on that entire planet. That entire planet has got storms and debris and a lot of other problems there. Now he doesn't know whether he'll be getting help, whether somebody will be coming from Earth to save him on a different planet altogether or not, whether he should die, because now imagine the scale of the problem, that you are alone on a planet, your spaceship has left, you do not know whether they forget that you will receive the help or not. They think that you are dead on that planet. This is how the crisis is being, this is how you are building up the crisis. They think that you have died, and when they were sure that you have died on that planet, after that belief or after that confirmation, or maybe after that misunderstanding, they left that planet to Earth. Now your challenge is that, interestingly, you are not dead on that planet. That planet does not have an environment like Earth, so you really need to be in a confined place. And more, the problem is that even that place has a possibility of blown off. You have nothing to eat, maybe you have limited oxygen on that planet, or maybe your own entire system, the space suit and everything. Nobody knows that you are alive on that planet, so you need to establish some sort of a communication. And interestingly, people, those who have left, obviously they believed, they understood, or they misunderstood, whatever it is, that you are dead, so you are gone from their memory also. They will worry about you, they will cry for you, but you don't exist. They reach. Now look at how on different fluctuation scale the problem is on top of one another, and how it is building like a tower in a story. Now the film that I am talking about is Martian, which was released in 2014, and it was directed by Andy Weir, and the protagonist, the Martian, is Matt Damon in that film. And if you have not seen this film, I would suggest, let me tell you the way film opens. It is a beautiful track, beautiful track shots. Somewhere they have used pan also. It's wide angle shot, and this is how the planet is introduced, that this is a different planet where few astronauts are there, and they are doing some research, and there is a base, and there is a storm about to come, they have to get back, and this is how the entire film opens. And how long, how much, like gravity, you can see only one people or two people on screen. There has to be more than a story when you are having this sort of a story. So it is more than a story. Now let me explain this film to you so that you can understand how 50 curve works, why it is important. You know, I'm telling you about this curve. Somebody has made millions of dollars out of it. You know, that's the beauty of story formats, that if you know it, you know, it makes you a better person, it makes you richer also. So it's a skill which you should learn, which is something that one must learn to tell good stories and mint money out of it also. So it is basically a skill that I am talking about. Now let's talk about this film Martian, which was released in 2014. The part 1 says rising action, which is obviously the first part will be rising action. The second part, this is how things will grow, and then there will be a falling action. The rising action in a 50 curve indicates the plot by thrusting the character into a sequence of crisis. Please understand this sequence of crisis right from the start of the story, which with each crisis increasing in, you know, both stakes and complexities. Now this is something, you know, a lot of our films technically is missing. You know, we take, which is a very unique quality of our storytelling. There is no problem with that, but the way audience is, you know, the way audience is, you know, accepting, and the preference of the new audience is that there has to be an acceleration in events one after another. Like I wonder whether if you make Garam Hawa sort of a film today, it will definitely be a flop, you know. And if whereas when you watch MS Satyu's Garam Hawa, you it it bothers you a lot. There is no doubt about it, but it takes its time. It gives not only the story, it gives time to audience to mature with the story. Now this is something very, very interesting, which is like most of our films are, you know, lagging far behind. They are not giving enough time to the audience to mature with the story. When I was watching Mere Mehboob, or when I watch Naya Daur, which is one of my favorite films, or Do Biga Zameen, you know, I may live in a metropolitan. You know, people used to live in metropolitan, but the way Bimal Roy has given space, has provided, has he the way he has said the story, even a urban individual develops a sort of a sense as if he is coming from the same background, and then he or she is able to connect very well with the story. Like today, when we write stories, when we Indian writers write stories, you know, there is a rush, and 50 Curve is also talking about a rush. There is a rush that, you know, it has to have something really interesting, really something mind blowing, something, you know, so unique that it can blow off the minds of the audience and things like that. But when I look our traditional Indian traditional storytelling style, it always provide a good space for any reader from any region, from any state, from any city, be that village or metropolitan or tier 2 cities or tier 3 cities, to let them sink and in tune with the setup part of the stories. Like when you see films like Pakiza, or when you see films like Mughal-e-Azam, or for that matter Sholay, you know, they give you time to come in sync with the story, and then you start, you know, enjoying each and every character. 50 Curve, the line A that I was talking about, which is the status quo in the film, which is the status quo of the story, actually that is something which needs to be very, very carefully crafted. That is where actually the success or the failure of the film lies. That are you giving enough time to your audience to get in sync with your story? Like suppose when I was watching Apocalypto, um, that is a story which is like the background is of Mayan civilization, and they have got their ways of hunting, their rituals, or a lot of other things, and the director actually gives time to the audience. He knows that this is a story which is set up in a very unique environment. This was missing in Mohenjo-daro, by the way. Uh, so there you really have to bring an audience in that world, and you really have to make them comfortable. Look, you may find this conversation, maybe not very important, but when you will listen the same point from Christopher Nolan or from James Cameron, then you value it more. But trust me, even these are the points even they talk about, they worry about. Though I have not heard either Christopher Nolan or James Cameron talking about this specific, but I have observed these points in their stories when they are creating Terminators. They actually let you sink in that world, and then they present the crisis which is around every bend, you know. So if as a mature writer you start jumping on crisis part only, that sir, I have written a wonderful story which has got really interesting points, this is how your character will be jumping from point A to point B, so this is the crisis A, this is crisis B. But the biggest task than writing these crises is that whether your audience is believing that this specific crisis is actually from the world of your character or not. Now this is something which you really need to put. That's why I always say that the setup of your story is so, it is sometime somebody can argue when I'm saying it, the setup part is sometime more important than the story. Once your setup part is right, once you are able to bring in your audience, and your audience is diverse, by the way, and especially in the world of OTT, a person who is sitting in his or her field is watching your content, somebody who is sitting in a multinational company is watching your content, and you really have to have this range, you really have to have this understanding that you can cater to the diverse demography of your audience. Now that's why you really need to understand these concepts, these points when we are talking about 50 curve. So the rising action in a 50 curve, initiates the plot by thrusting the characters into a sequence of crisis right from the start of the story, with each crisis increasing in both stakes and complexity. Now, whether it involves a sequence of intense and distressing confrontation in a thrilling, or a growing number of misinterpretation in a romance, the phase guarantees a reader to captivating, eagerly awaiting what will happen next. In the film Martian, the voyage of Mark Watney. Now, Mark Watney is the name of the protagonist, who is a NASA crew member who is on a planet, you know, and he becomes stranded on Mars following a terrible incident. Now, what is like I have told you the story, that this is how the story works of Martian. Very interesting film. You must watch it if you have not seen it. Now, NASA's Ares-3 team must evacuate their mission on Mars halfway through after being after being altered to an impending storm. Mark Watney is stuck with debris and thought dead. So the crew is forced to leave without him. Now the crisis too is that Watney wakes up wounded, alone on the red planet, and with no way of contacting NASA or his crew members on their ship, the Hermes. He weighs to slim odds of, there are slim odds of his survival. With a plan to try and survive until the next Ares crew arrive, Watney attempts to farm potatoes, but it blows up in his face literally. Now, this scene is really interesting. When you watch that film, then you realize that and how this particular crisis is linked with the culmination part of the story. That is also very interesting, and it says that I in my entire life I am not going to don the astronaut suit ever in my life again. And he gets into teaching that how if you are stuck, he becomes an expert of that. If you are stuck on a planet, then how you can survive alone and things like that. Because this is what the entire film is all about. The Crisis 4 talks about Watney's reattempt to farm. Reattempt to farm is successful, and he finally makes contact with NASA. Also, all looks to be on the up until everything blows up in the face again. The HAB unit he is living is destroyed, and all his crops die. It's a beautiful scene. It's a mind blowing scene. That's what I say, that you may not you may know the story. A lot of people have best stories in the world, but the way you make events unfold one after another is what makes it interesting. The crisis number 5 is that things aren't better on Earth, where a decision to save time or on safety inspections for an emergency supply launch to Whitney also results in an explosion. Now, the mystery, the rising action in many genres might manifest in very different ways. Like in mystery, every clue, every unsuccessful attempt is basically raising a stake in a critical situation. In romance, relationship can manifest as a sequence of unsuccessful dates or any of the challenges encountered by the new couple. In fantasy, new the discovery of new power is bringing new challenges. And when in terms of thriller or horror, when we talk about thriller or horror, we are talking about how when you think that you have solved the problem, it is you actually have not. So there is always stake on the rise. Now, when we talk about climax part, the climax function as an apex of your tale, where all the accumulated tension and conflict culminate in intense excitement. This is essentially the culmination of all the protagonist preparation, whether it is a grand fight or a heartfelt expression of love. Now, this is what climax is actually all about. It is a culmination of all the planning, all the training, and you are putting your best. So that's what climax is. This is when the characters face their most challenging barriers, where choices have significant implications, where the main conflict of the story needs to be resolved. Now, the climax of Martian occurs when all hope seems utterly exhausted. Explosions have occurred, causing significant consequences for everyone involved. However, three crucial events take place in this situation. What are those three events? That the NASA's spaceship has blown off, so the Chinese National Space Administration offered their booster. Part 2 says that NASA is not ready to send people. They're saying, they're not ready, just simply, though there are equations, there are possibilities. So part 3 says that the crew members of Ares, they goes rogue, forcing NASA to use the booster to send the resupply to them on the Hermes instead. Now, This is how it happens that at the crucial juncture, the initiatives of emotion, the intensity of the emotion is increased, reaching the highest point of all previous events and decisions, and preparing for the unavoidable conclusion of the story. Following the intense climax, the resolution provides a period of relief, allowing for the setting of dust and resolving of any remaining question. Now, this is the point at which you will resolve any remaining issues, provided insight into the new normal of your character. So, revisiting the Martian once again, the story resolution commences when Ares' three crew embarks on their return voyage to the Red Planet with the objective of resulting Whitney's life. The rescue mission has a few final hiccups, but Whitney is successfully saved and everybody returns to home on the Hermes. Back on Earth, Whitney happily vows to never don his spacesuit again. He vows it, instead opts to teach future astronauts how to survive the wilds of the final frontier. Now, the resolution of this story, whether the protagonist succeeds or suffers the consequences of failure, serves to strengthen the main theme of the story and demonstrate the ending effect of the character's journey. Essentially, it offers a gratifying and emotionally impactful ending that continues to have an effect even after finishing the book. So this is how when you are talking about 50th curve, there are a lot of things which need to be understood when we are talking about how we can generate fluctuation. To generate fluctuation, one very important point which can be a concluding point also, that pace of the story is really important. I hope you understood 15 curve really well, where pacing is important, where setting of the story is equally important. Thank you very much.